Hello guys, welcome to the Testing Academy. My name is Pramod, and in this tutorial we are going to learn about how to do API testing using Postman. So this is a part one of the series that I am working on right now, and it will be extensively, you can say, a practical guide how to do an extensive API testing, especially using the Postman. So before jumping into directly into the Postman tool, we need to understand certain points about the APIs and what exactly we have to do if we are doing an API testing, right? So let's get started with it. So before starting out, just wanted to let you know that about little bit about myself. My name is Pramod, and I've been into software testing and test automation field for nearly around 5 years. And I have worked with like lots of different projects related to banking domain, automation, marketing automation, especially related to A/B testing and all. And we have been like running lots of different test cases using Selenium Grid, Docker Swarm, as well as right now we are moving to Kubernetes. So you can, if you want to follow up, you can follow up on my website, that is scrolltest.com, and you can go to the testingacademy.com, where I'm putting lots of tutorial related to Selenium API testing and mainly stuff related to test automation. It's a group where we share lots of information, and it will be great if you join it. So let's get started. So before starting to this tutorial, I'm going to give you an overview what exactly you will learn in this series. So we are going to basically advance your career, especially related to software testing, and API testing is important. If you are a software tester, you want to increase any kind of domain expertise, especially in API testing, then learning API testing is important for you. And we are going to learn more about API testing and certain STPP methods, where we will learn how we can do certain requests in Postman, especially using get, put, post, and how as an enterprise level we are doing in its industry standard. I am going to show you practically and how we are leveraging especially the Postman tool, the Newman tool especially, and running our certain kind of API testing test cases on different kind of Docker grids now. And so let's what you are going to learn in this tutorial. So you are going to learn about the basic stuff here, and the basic stuff will include like what is API, what is an API testing, what is the difference between a SOAP as well as the REST API, and what are the common types of bugs that we generally encounter when we using the API testing, how to do API testing, and why we should do the API testing. These are the things that we are going to explain. And the last in the last points, I'm going to explain you extensively about the REST, what is REST and what is RESTful web services, and I'm going to explain you different constraints, especially related to the API, especially related to the REST. What are the 6 major constraints of REST that make any kind of API RESTful? That's like one of the big concepts. And in the last part, we are going to install our first Postman, and I will give you a small walkthrough about the Postman, right? So let's get started. So before so the first question comes into, right? So what's an API? API, it basically stands with the application programming interface, and it's basically, you can say, the certain collections of functions or procedure which basically allows to communicate between two applications. Let me give you a very simple example. As you can see in the screen right now, suppose you go to a restaurant, and API is basically a waiter that takes your order and from you, and tells the chef in the kitchen that what exactly food needs to be prepared, right? This is like a simplest example where whenever the clients give certain kind of order, a waiter takes the order and give it to chef, and chef, after getting the order, it will basically respond back to the client. So right now the waiter is acting as a API right here. But and that we have discussed previously, that API is basically, you can say, these are just set of functions, or you can say procedures, right? And if we come up with a theoretical definition, then it will be API is an interface between any two software application, right? So let's understand what are the types of APIs especially available when we are thinking about the web APIs right now. So the first one is SOAP, JSON RPC, XML RPC, and REST. So these are like four major types of APIs available, and we are going to discuss more about them in a minute. So before that, we need to understand what is an API testing. A simplest way to answer this is that testing an API is API testing, right? But whenever we have like front end and where we have back end and there is a API sitting around, right, we need to test those that the created API, whatever the application programming interface, the set of APIs that is created, we need to validate that if they are like mutually agreeing that this API works. Because if anything breaks in API, is basically a problem for a front end, right? Client side will have a major impact whenever there's a problem in API. So we need to test extensively about the integration and with the services, right? This is the simplest example, simplest you can say theoretical definition of API testing. So the next question arises that why we should perform the API testing, right? So I'll give you an example. It's the simplest. The 4 points I have mentioned is that the third one, as you can look around, it's the developer will make mistake and they will create a buggy API. So then for example, a API can be like there is a particular setting. We are a front end is expecting the 21 keys to come in a JSON format, but it is coming as 21. And in front end there was a logic to calculate the number of keys and all. So it will break the UI, right? And it will be a very bad impact on client side if there is a particular bug in API. So we need to test the API, right? So we should perform API testing extensively. And right now, as you can say, internet uses like millions of APIs like Twitter, Slack API, Instagram API, Facebook API, and so there are like number of millions of API requests right now going on, and so they should be tested thoroughly. And the first point, as I have discussed, that many of the services that we use every day, they are basically relies on APIs, interconnected APIs. So we need to test them thoroughly, right? And one of the important factor is that we require validation of API. It's very important whenever we are going to make these API into production, and right. So the question arises that what to test in API, right? And these are like four, you can say, important points, but they're like what to test in API is very long list if you are doing it practically. But in theoretical concepts, what you are doing is that basically we are just verifying that how APIs are basically behaving whenever there is a particular bug or whenever particular invalid response. For example, we are just testing different kind of what kind of status code it is coming if we are sending an invalid payload, and what kind of if we are doing the API testing, we require that JSON schema as well as XML schema should be validated, and we should do certain for the keys, especially the keys coming in the APIs as a response. We need to validate those keys. We need to check the boundary values if particularly a response is according to a boundary value system. So these kind of major 4 points that we have to do. And other things like what we have to do in API testing is that we need to test thoroughly with performance test how these APIs are behaving whenever there's a particular load of test, performance test. Basically a particular kind of load is coming on these APIs, how these APIs are behaving, and these are like major things that you have to test in API, right? I hope that makes sense. So now we need to understand what is an SOAP. So it is a type of an API. It's a type of an API where if you think about the full form of SOAP, it's basically a simple object access protocol, right? It's basically a messaging protocol that allows you to program. You can communicate with any kind of server or any kind of service using this what we call it a SOAP envelope, where it contains certain XML type of WSDL, web services the definition language kind of structure of an API, where client sends a request according to this envelope and server responds back according to this XML based architecture, right? SOAP uses like similar to the REST API, it uses the HTTP methods, and we have extensive differentiation in the coming slide. So before that, we need to understand what is REST. REST is nothing but it's a representational state transfer. It's a, you can say it's a design pattern for an API. It's the REST architecture basically describe the six constraint. So these are the six major constraint that any API, if they follow these kind of six constraint, we call them a RESTful web services or RESTful web API, right? So let's understand what is the major difference between the SOAP and REST. Guys, please understand this is one of the important major interview questions whenever we are doing, especially for the API testing. And so the major difference is very simple. SOAP is basically an XML based messaging protocol, whereas REST is an architectural style protocol. REST is majorly similar to the design pattern of an API with the six constraint, whereas SOAP is just a messaging protocol between client and server, right? SOAP follows the WSDL. What is it? So it's a web services definition language where you have a certain language to communicate with service with your server, right? But whereas in REST you can use XML or as any kind of JSON to send and receive data, right? And the another next difference is that SOAP basically invokes using the RPC. These are like request procedure calls, whereas if you think about the REST, what you have to do is that you have to make the request according to your URL path, right? If you are doing a get post or put, you have to do certain kind of you will be provided a certain URL and you have to do just these requests according to that, right? And most of the time, as we have seen, that SOAP is basically an envelope based, it contains certain envelopes to send message. So generally it's not human readable, but whereas in REST, most of the time the response coming is based on XML and JSON, which can be easily be interpreted by any kind of human. And the fifth point is that both of them operate over STPP, but whereas SOAP can operate over SMTP, that is simple mail transfer protocol, as well as with FTP also, which is a file transfer protocol. So it can work with SMTP and FTP, the SOAP one, but whereas in the REST is specially related to the STPP methods, right? And as you can see, the sixth point is that the JavaScript call can call a SOAP, but it's difficult to implement, whereas REST APIs we can use any like JavaScript to call to use it, right? And generally the last point, as we have mentioned, is that performance is not great as compared to REST. So SOAP is slow, it's complex, and it's envelope based. So it's a messaging protocol, it's a complex one, and it's you can say performance is not great whenever we are sending a SOAP, whenever we are using a SOAP API especially. Whereas in the REST, performance is much better because we are just sending the low, you can say very small, very not small actually, where only the payloads in JSONs and XMLs, and they are not very much, you can say, CPU extensive, right? I hope you have understand that's what is the difference between the SOAP and REST. So let's move on. So the question arises that who uses this REST APIs? Especially we are concerned about the REST APIs right now, and so who uses basically Twitter API, LinkedIn API, Slack, REST APIs are everywhere. If you think, like millions of requests are right now millions of users are right now using REST API. For example, a simple application that you are using in Android, basically it's for example an Instagram app, it's fetching the users using the REST API. It's fetching any kind of user information, likes, follows, whatever it is, using the REST API. So REST is everywhere nearly around. So I'm going to explain you the six major constraints of REST. So these are very important to understand, and most of the time sometimes they are also come in interviews. So please pay attention about the six major constraints about the REST, right? So REST, if we talk about the first constraint, it's a uniform interface. It basically means that, as you are seeing in the slide, it basically says that that the client side server has to communicate and agree to a certain rule-based resources. Basically, it means that there is a client, there is a server. They need to communicate each other, and they have to have certain kind of rules that they need to be followed. For example, if they are communicating, then client will send a JSON request to the server, then server needs to understand it, and server has to send that request into the JSON. So they need to agree on it. So the interface that we have, it should be uniform. That's what the uniform interface means. If they are using for example, the client is using a certain kind of encoding of UTF-8, then server has to respond back into that the same kind of encoding. So that is like a simple, you can say, uniform interface. That's one of the you can say constraint if an API is RESTful. Let's come to the second one. Second one is a very simple one. It's basically means that that stateless basically means that server does not remember anything about the users who uses the API. For example, the first client made a request to getting a user. The server will respond back and would forget about it. Means this is a stateless call. Now the server will not able to understand or not able to remember what kind of request they have asked. So it's totally a stateless call, right? The third important constraint is that cacheable. For it's basically means that that data that server sends whenever client requests a particular thing, for example user information from a server, then server can send the information, and it can send whether this information has to be cacheable or not. For example, if the data is cacheable, then they might contain certain kind of version numbers, and that version number what makes the caching possible. For example, the server will tell that okay, you can cache this resource as of now for a particular period of time, right? This is one of the constraint. The another constraint basically means that there are like there will be a client, there will be a server, and they will be like two different entities, and they behave independent. They can behave independently, whatever it is. So they are not like clubbed with each other. This is one of the constraint for REST, right? And this is the layered system constraint basically means that if there is a client, there is a server, that we can have any number of layer between them. For example, we want to include a security layer between them, we can have it. So it means as you can see in the slide is that we can have any kind of layer between the client and server. It doesn't matter until there is a client, there is a server, then we can have this API as a RESTful, right? This one is optional, the code on demand. It's the last sixth major important REST constraint. Sometimes we call it it's a optional one. It basically means that server can store the code or logic to themselves and transfer it whenever needed to the client. For example, the core logic of whatever the core things are doing. For example, if this client sends what is the 1 plus 1, it's called a function, and server respond back with a 2. The client doesn't know what kind of logic that you have done to do this, right? But so server can store the information and it can reply back the code whenever it is needed, whenever clients ask for it. So these are the like major 6 REST constraint explained, and if any API follows these 6 constraints, and so we call it as a RESTful API, right? I hope that makes sense. So right now what we are doing is that we are going to install the simple Postman. So let's move to our demo part, right? Here it is. So I hope you are able to see that. Let me confirm one thing. Yes. So what you can do is that to start you can go to the get Postman, and we are going to basically I'm going to explain you what is Postman. So Postman right now, it's you can say an integrated development environment for API especially, but we as a software tester, we can use to test this especially the related to REST APIs, we can test it, right? It's right now becoming an integrated development environment, but we are leveraging it according to our needs, right? What you can do is that just go to the getpostman.com and click on this get started and download the exe. It's a very simple process, step by step. You can download whatever version it is. If you are on Mac, it will give you an option to download the Mac OS also, right? Here it is. When you install it the first time, you will see this this window. Let's understand it like one by one, what's exactly going on this end, right? The first one is new. So everything in the Postman, it's a kind of a request, right? You are making, and we are going to understand this request different kind of HTTP methods in upcoming tutorials. So right now the first if you go to click on the first one, it basically gives you a certain building blocks, right? You can create a request, you can create a collection. What is a collection? It's a kind of, you can say, collections of request. For example, if you want to make a collections only related to the login page, then there will be a collections of requests according to your according to that will only contain the request related to login, right? And you can create environment. Environment basically means the certain kind of global variables or variable that you are going to use in your request, right? So that will make much more sense whenever we are doing in probably in second or third part of this series. As we have mentioned that yeah, Postman is right now becoming an integrated development environment, so it can give you a feature like documentation, mock server, as well as monitoring the API, right? Here it is. Again, if you go to this button, you can create your new collection if you want to. For example, let me create a demo collection, and you can give the description like anything. You can even authenticate this collection. For example, if anyone wants to use this collection, he needs to have certain kind of authentication. You can create an API key, and you can do some prescripts. Prescripts are basically the scripts that are going to run before running this collection. And if you collections are basically, for example, a flow of request. Simplest example I will give you is that, for example, there is a user can create a profile, and after creating a profile, user can perform different requests. So there will be like multiple requests. We can do a create account, where after creating an account, we'll get the user ID then makes a request to certain things, right? So there will be like 4 or 3 requests, right? So what we can do is that we can put that all this number of requests into a collection, and before running this collection, you can run this prescripts. It's right now the scripts will be in JavaScript, and mainly the syntax that they are following is JavaScript, right? So you can create any variables you want to use in this collection, as well as after running the test, you can run after running this collection, you can run certain tests. For example, if I have created a collection that basically returns certain kind of user IDs and anything like dynamically after from server, you can write certain test cases around that. I am getting the user ID and it's a valid user ID, right? And you can mention the variables also, what kind of variable this collection is going to use, right? All right, so this is the main environment. This is the main window here, where you have like different kinds of methods. Most of them are HTTP methods, where simple HTTP method related to get, post, put, patch. These all kind of methods I'm going to explain in next upcoming tutorials. And what you can do, as I have mentioned that in the REST API especially, that you can REST API works generally with the URLs. So you can mention the URL and what kind of authorization that it needs, and you can insert the body. For example, if you click on row, you can mention any kind of JSON request that you want to. If you click on any kind of JSON request, right? I'm going to show you a demo of one of the simplest application, simplest demo of get. Let me go to this URL. So it's a fake if you go to this request response, that is req.in, it's give you a kind of a fake data especially. So what you can do, if I want to get the data list of users, I can do this thing, right? I'm going to put this URL and probably this. So this is the simplest request. I'm going to send it. Okay, let me see, let me remove that thing. Yeah, so if you go to this URL, basically get the main domain. This is the main domain, and especially that this is an endpoint of API users, where we want to get the list of all the users and up to the page 2. This is the query parameter, and query parameter is a 2. So we want 2 pages, right? And on the page 2, we are getting the response in JSON format. If you take it's a JSON format right now, right? And it's right now Postman has prettify it, and we are getting the 3 response, that these are the 3 users. They have different IDs, they have email, first name, last name, and there is a particular image of them. It's a dummy API right now, it is returning, and we can ask for the first one also, and it will give you the first one, right? And right, so what exactly is going on, we are basically making a simple get request to a server, and this API can be used by any kind of web application, even and simple Android application, where you have to show 3 users to a particular client or any in Android app, right? So it's a basic overview of a Postman. Another important thing that you can do is that you can sign in, so that you can save your whatever collection you are creating in Postman. It's totally free, and you can tweet about it, These are notifications especially, and this is a setting. And if you go to the setting, this is an important part of Postman. Where you can do is that you can do you have like bunch of different options. You can change the theme also. You can go to dark theme, and these are different kind of shortcuts. These are like general settings what you can do, language detection and all. Pretty much we don't have to mess up with initially when we are doing, don't have to mess up it. The most important one is SSL certification verification. By default it's on. For example, if you're working in staging environment, I would suggest you to switch it off right now, because it will give you SSL errors, right? And data, you can export the data also. Add-ons right now you don't have required. Certification, proxy, update, upload, most of the thing right now initially we don't require. And another important point is that environment. And but this is one of the important thing that you need to keep in mind. You can create an environment basically contains certain kind of variables. These can be global variables or a normal variables. There are like different types of variables in Postman. I'm going to discuss them in the future, but these variables you can use it. For example, if you want to send a particular email ID, what you can do is you can mention that email ID into this environment variable, and you can mention the password also. So it will be like secure, and it will be a separate from your normal request, right? And if you want to pass, for example, there's a particular first request is creating a user and you're getting a user ID, you can save the user ID into environment and use it into your next request. You can do that also in the Postman, right? So this was like a basic demo of Postman, as well as I have explained you different test constraint and what is API testing and how we are doing it. So I hope you have liked this tutorial. Let me know in the comments below, means how do you understand it, means what are any kind of doubts you would like to. And just wanted to know about, I really love to get certain feedback for this video especially. And so see you in the next one, and don't forget to like, subscribe and comment if you are watching on YouTube. So, and have a nice day. And in the next tutorial we are going to understand the basics of HTTP methods, and we are going to run certain we are going to perform certain kinds of practically different methods, especially these ones, all of them, generally most of them we are going to run, and we are going to understand the authorization model, right? So have a nice day and bye.